Before we get into the story, leave a comment and let us know what city you're watching from. And don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10 at the end. Enjoy the story. The fluorescent lights in the Sterling marketing offices buzzed like angry wasps as Emma Clark stared at her computer screen, the resignation letter cursor blinking mockingly at her. 3 years of working under Daniel Sterling had been 3 years too many, and today's meeting had been the final straw. She could still hear his voice echoing in the conference room, cold and dismissive, as he'd torn apart her campaign proposal in front of the entire team. "This is amateur work, Clark. I expected better from someone with your supposed experience." The way he'd said her name like it left a bitter taste in his mouth, the way he'd barely glanced at the presentation she'd spent weeks perfecting, the way he'd made her feel 2 inches tall in front of colleagues who'd become friends. Emma's fingers hovered over the keyboard, then began typing with fierce determination. "Dear Mr. Sterling, please accept this letter as my formal notice of resignation from my position as Senior Marketing Coordinator. My last day of employment will be 2 weeks from today's date." She paused, tempted to add something about his impossible standards, his tendency to micromanage everything down to font choices, or the way he seemed to take personal pleasure in shooting down creative ideas. But Emma had more class than that, even if her boss apparently didn't. "Thank you for the learning opportunities during my tenure here. Sincerely, Emma Clark." Short, professional, and completely lacking the satisfaction she'd hoped for. Emma hit print and leaned back in her ergonomic chair, watching the paper emerge from the printer like a tiny white flag of surrender. Except this wasn't surrender, she reminded herself. This was strategic retreat. "You look like someone stole your coffee," said Jess Martinez, Emma's cubicle neighbor and closest friend at Sterling Marketing. She perched on the edge of Emma's desk, her dark eyes immediately zeroing in on the resignation letter. "Oh my God. Em, you're really doing it?" Emma snatched the paper before anyone else could see it. "Keep your voice down. I don't need the whole office knowing before I tell him." "Tell who what?" The deep voice behind them made both women freeze. Emma's shoulders tensed automatically, a Pavlovian response she'd developed over 3 years of working under Daniel Sterling's critical gaze. She turned slowly, clutching the resignation letter against her chest like armor. Daniel stood there in his perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his dark hair styled with the kind of precision that probably required a personal stylist, and those sharp, green eyes that seemed to catalog every flaw in a room within seconds. At 32, he was younger than most company executives, which somehow made his arrogance even more insufferable. "Mr. Sterling," Emma said, proud that her voice came out steady, "I was just about to request a meeting with you." His eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of surprise on his otherwise composed features. "How convenient. I was coming to discuss the Morrison account with you. My office, 5 minutes." He turned and walked away without waiting for a response, because of course he did. Daniel Sterling didn't wait for anyone or anything. The universe apparently operated on his schedule. Jess grabbed Emma's arm. "Don't do it. Just transfer to another department. Hell, I'll help you update your resume and find something else, but don't quit without another job lined up." Emma shook her head, already gathering her courage along with the resignation letter. "I can't work for him anymore, Jess. I'm good at what I do, really good. But he makes me doubt everything. I spent 3 weeks on that campaign proposal, and he didn't even consider it. Just dismissed it like I'd scribbled something on a napkin. But Emma, no buts. I've got enough savings to last a few months, and my portfolio speaks for itself. Someone will hire me, someone who actually values creative input instead of treating their employees like obstacles to overcome." Emma straightened her blazer, tucked the resignation letter into a folder, and walked toward Daniel's corner office. The glass walls gave the illusion of transparency while maintaining complete executive isolation. She knocked on the doorframe, even though the door was open. "Come in and close the door," Daniel said without looking up from his computer. Emma stepped inside, immediately feeling trapped by the mahogany furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased his success while making everyone else feel small. "Sit," he commanded, still typing. Emma remained standing, partly out of defiance, and partly because sitting would mean looking up at him from an even more disadvantageous angle. Finally, he stopped typing and fixed those unsettling green eyes on her. "The Morrison account needs a complete overhaul. Their current strategy isn't working, and they're threatening to find new representation. I'm putting you in charge of developing a new approach. I want preliminary concepts by Friday." Emma blinked. After destroying her morning's work, he was assigning her the company's most challenging account. "Sir, about that, I actually need to. This is a significant opportunity, Clark. Morrison Industries is worth millions to this company. Don't disappoint me." The dismissive tone, the assumption that she'd jump at his command, the complete disregard for her feelings about this morning's humiliation, it all crystallized into perfect clarity. Emma pulled out the resignation letter and placed it on his pristine desk. "I won't be working on the Morrison account or any other account, Mr. Sterling. This is my 2 weeks' notice." For the first time in 3 years, Emma saw Daniel Sterling genuinely surprised. His eyes widened slightly before his expression hardened into something approaching fury. "You're quitting?" "That's generally what resignation letters indicate, yes." Daniel picked up the paper, read it quickly, then looked back at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "This is about this morning's meeting." "This is about 3 years of morning meetings just like that one. I provide feedback to help you improve. That's what good managers do." Emma laughed, a sound sharp enough to cut glass. Feedback involves suggestions for improvement. What you do is demolish people's work without offering alternatives. There's a difference. Daniel stood up, his height advantage now pronounced as he towered over her. "I have high standards, Clark. If you can't meet them, your standards aren't high, they're impossible. And they change depending on your mood. I've seen you approve campaigns that were objectively worse than things you've rejected from me. That's not. It is true, and we both know it." Emma felt 3 years of frustration boiling over. "I'm a good marketer, Mr. Sterling. I have excellent instincts, strong technical skills, and clients like working with me. But you've spent 3 years making me question all of that." Daniel's jaw tightened. "If you walk out of here, don't expect a recommendation letter." "I wouldn't ask for one." Emma turned toward the door, then paused. "You know what's funny? I actually used to respect you. Your reputation in the industry, the way you built this company, your strategic mind. But respect is a two-way street, and you've never shown an ounce of it to anyone who works for you." She left him standing there, closing the door firmly behind her. The entire office seemed to be pretending not to watch as she walked back to her desk, but Emma could feel their eyes following her every step. Jess jumped up immediately. "How did it go? Did you actually give it to him?" Emma began pulling personal items from her desk drawers. "I gave it to him. 2 weeks. Then I'm free." "Emma, are you sure about this? The job market is tough right now, and Sterling marketing looks good on a resume." Emma looked around the office that had been her professional home for 3 years, at the colleagues who'd become friends, at the window view she'd grown to love. Then she thought about Daniel Sterling's dismissive voice, his impossible standards, and the way he'd made her feel incompetent despite her obvious success. "I'm sure," she said, placing her favorite coffee mug in a box. "Life's too short to spend it working for someone who doesn't value what you bring to the table." 2 weeks later, Emma walked out of Sterling Marketing for the last time, her personal belongings in a single cardboard box, and her head held high. She had a new job lined up at Innovative Solutions, a rapidly growing startup with a reputation for creativity and employee appreciation. The pay was slightly less, but the company culture seemed light years better. As she walked to her car, Emma allowed herself one look back at the sleek office building where she'd spent 3 years of her life. Daniel Sterling was probably already interviewing her replacement, someone new to intimidate and undermine. Well, that was no longer her problem. Emma Clark was finally free. The Innovative Solutions building buzzed with an energy that Emma had forgotten existed in professional environments. Instead of sterile corporate gray, the walls were painted in warm blues and greens, with local artwork and inspirational quotes scattered throughout. The open floor plan actually felt collaborative rather than like a surveillance system, and people seemed to genuinely enjoy being there. Emma Clark, a woman with curly red hair and paint-stained fingernails, approached her in the lobby. "I'm Sarah Williams, creative director. Welcome to the Madhouse." Emma laughed, immediately liking Sarah's warm smile and unpretentious demeanor. "Thanks for having me. I'm excited to start. Coffee first, then I'll show you around. Fair warning, we're a little chaotic here, but in the best possible way. Our CEO believes in giving people space to be creative, which sometimes means things get wonderfully weird." They walked through an actual Kit Clark, not just a break room with a microwave, where several employees were preparing fresh breakfast. "Help yourself to anything," Sarah said, pouring 2 cups of coffee from what appeared to be an expensive espresso machine. One of the perks of working for a company that actually values employee satisfaction. Emma accepted the coffee gratefully. After 3 years of bitter break-room swill at Sterling Marketing, the rich aroma alone felt like a luxury. "This is amazing. Your CEO sounds like he knows how to treat people." Sarah corrected with a grin. Melissa Zhang founded the company 5 years ago after getting fed up with traditional corporate culture. She's traveling this week, but you'll love her. Very hands-on, but not in a micromanaging way. More like a mentor who trusts you to do your job. The contrast with Emma's previous workplace couldn't have been more stark. As Sarah led her through the office, Emma met designers, writers, and strategists who all seemed genuinely enthusiastic about their projects. No one looked stressed or defeated. No one was hiding behind their computer screens to avoid attention. "Here's your workspace," Sarah said, stopping at a desk near a large window overlooking the city park. Melissa insisted on natural light for everyone. She says fluorescent bulbs kill creativity. Emma's new desk was twice the size of her old cubicle, with an adjustable height option and a small plant already waiting for her. "This is perfect. I can't believe how different this feels from my last job." "Bad experience?" Sarah asked, sympathetically. 3 years under a boss who seemed to think crushing people's spirits was effective management. Emma began unpacking her few belongings, including the coffee mug she'd refused to leave behind. "Let's just say I'm looking forward to working somewhere that encourages ideas instead of destroying them." Sarah's expression darkened slightly. "Sounds like you worked for one of those old-school corporate tyrants. Unfortunately, there are still plenty of them out there, making people miserable because they can. Well, you're in a safe space now. We actually celebrate creative thinking here." The first week at Innovative Solutions flew by in a blur of brainstorming sessions, collaborative meetings, and actual lunch breaks. Emma found herself staying late, not because she was required to, but because she was genuinely excited about the projects she was working on. Her ideas were welcomed, refined, and implemented. For the first time in years, she felt like a valued team member rather than a convenient target. "You're glowing," Jess observed during their weekly coffee date. "Seriously, Em, you look like a completely different person." Emma stirred her latte, unable to suppress her smile. "I forgot what it felt like to enjoy going to work. My boss actually asks for my opinion, and then listens to the answer. Revolutionary concept, right?" "I'm jealous. Sterling's been even worse since you left. He hired your replacement, some guy fresh out of college who's terrified to breathe wrong. And get this, he's been asking about you. Asking what about me? Where you went, if you're happy, whether you've said anything about working there. Jess leaned forward conspiratorially. I think he regrets letting you go. Emma laughed. He didn't let me go. I quit. And frankly, I don't care if he regrets it. I'm exactly where I need to be. Still, it's nice to know he's realizing what he lost. But Emma had already moved on. Daniel Sterling and Sterling Marketing felt like ancient history, a chapter she'd closed and had no intention of reopening. Her new life was everything she'd hoped for, and more. On Friday afternoon, Sarah knocked on Emma's desk. Emergency team meeting in conference room A. Nothing bad, she added quickly, seeing Emma's expression. Just some big news from Melissa. The conference room was packed with excited employees, all speculating about the announcement. Emma had only been there a week, but she already felt included in the company's inner circle. The culture of transparency and mutual respect was unlike anything she'd experienced. Sorry I'm calling this last minute, Sarah began, but I just got off the phone with Melissa, and she wanted me to share some exciting news immediately. Emma noticed several of her new colleagues exchanging knowing looks, as if they were expecting something significant. As you all know, we've been growing rapidly, taking on bigger clients, and expanding our services. Well, Melissa just closed a deal that's going to change everything for us. Sarah paused for dramatic effect. We've been acquired by Sterling Enterprises. Emma's blood turned to ice. Sterling Enterprises, she managed to ask, though her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Not Sterling Marketing, Sarah clarified quickly. Sterling Enterprises is the parent company. They own dozens of businesses across different industries. It's actually perfect for us, because they're known for letting their acquisitions maintain their independence while providing resources for growth. Relief flooded through Emma. Sterling Enterprises was huge, a completely different entity from the marketing company, where she'd been miserable. She'd probably never even encounter anyone from her old life. The best part, Sarah continued, is that we're keeping our entire leadership structure. Melissa stays as CEO. Our company culture remains intact, and we get access to Sterling Enterprises' resources and client base. It's basically everything we could have hoped for. The room erupted in applause and excited chatter. Emma joined in, genuinely happy for her new colleagues, and relieved that her fresh start wouldn't be compromised by corporate restructuring. There will be some new faces around as we integrate systems and processes, Sarah added, but we've been assured that our creative independence is non-negotiable. That's why Melissa chose Sterling Enterprises over other offers. Emma's phone buzzed with a text from Jess. Did you hear? Sterling Marketing got acquired too. Same parent company. Crazy coincidence. Emma stared at the message, a cold knot forming in her stomach. Sterling Marketing was now part of the same corporate family as Innovative Solutions. But that didn't necessarily mean anything, she told herself. Huge companies had hundreds of subsidiaries that never interacted with each other. You okay? Asked Tom, one of the graphic designers. You look like you've seen a ghost. Emma forced a smile. Just processing the news, it's a lot to take in. Change is always scary, he agreed. But this feels like good change. More resources, bigger projects, same great culture. Emma nodded, pushing down her anxiety. She was being paranoid. Daniel Sterling was just one person in a massive corporate structure. The chances of their paths crossing were virtually non-existent. Besides, even if they did encounter each other somehow, she was in a completely different situation now. She had a supportive boss, encouraging colleagues, and work that actually mattered to her. Daniel Sterling couldn't touch her anymore. As the meeting dispersed, and everyone returned to their desks, Emma tried to recapture the contentment she'd felt just an hour earlier. This acquisition was good news for Innovative Solutions, and by extension, good news for her career. She refused to let thoughts of her former boss overshadow the best. professional opportunity she'd ever had. Monday morning brought an email that made Emma's coffee taste like ash. The subject line was innocuous enough. "Welcome to the Sterling Enterprises family. Integration meeting today at 2 p.m. But as she read the details about meeting the executive team that would be overseeing the transition, one name stood out like a neon warning sign. Daniel Sterling, Senior Vice President of Strategic Operations. Emma stared at her computer screen, certain she was hallucinating. Daniel Sterling worked at Sterling Marketing, not Sterling Enterprises. He was a company owner, not a corporate executive. This had to be a mistake, maybe someone with the same name. "Hey, Emma!" Sarah bounced over to her desk, practically vibrating with excitement. "Did you see the email about this afternoon? We're finally going to meet some of the Sterling Enterprises leadership. I'm curious to see what they're like." "Sarah," Emma said carefully. "The Daniel Sterling mentioned in the email. Do you know anything about him?" "Not much, just that he's supposed to be brilliant at strategic planning and corporate development." "Why?" Emma's throat felt tight. "I think I might know him, from my previous job." "Really?" "Small world. That's great. You'll have a familiar face in the room." If only Sarah knew how unfamiliar she hoped that face would stay. Emma spent the rest of the morning in a state of low-level panic, alternating between hoping it was a different Daniel Sterling and dreading the confirmation that it wasn't. She considered calling in sick for the afternoon, but that would only delay the inevitable. At 1:55 p.m., Emma reluctantly made her way to Conference Room A, which had been transformed with additional chairs and a presentation screen. Her new colleagues filed in, chattering excitedly about the future, while Emma positioned herself in the back corner, hoping to blend into the wallpaper. The door opened, and several people in expensive suits entered, led by a woman with silver hair and commanding presence. Emma relaxed slightly until she saw the figure walking behind her, tall and imposing in that familiar charcoal suit. It was definitely Daniel Sterling, and he was scanning the room with those sharp green eyes that missed nothing. Emma sank lower in her chair, grateful for the graphic designer sitting in front of her, who provided partial camouflage. Maybe she could get through this meeting without being noticed, then figure out how to handle the situation afterward. "Good afternoon, everyone," the silver-haired woman began. "I'm Catherine Sterling, CEO of Sterling Enterprises, and I'm delighted to welcome innovative solutions to our family of companies." Emma's heart stopped. Catherine Sterling, as in Daniel Sterling's relation. This kept getting worse. "I want to assure you that we acquired innovative solutions because of what you've built here, not to change it. Your creative culture and innovative approaches are exactly what we value." Catherine gestured to the people beside her. "I've brought some of our key executives who will be working with you during the transition." She introduced several people whose names Emma barely registered, focused as she was on trying to become invisible. But invisibility, she was learning, was not one of her strengths. "And this is my son, Daniel Sterling, our Senior Vice President of Strategic Operations. Daniel will be working closely with your team to identify synergies and growth opportunities." Daniel stepped forward, and Emma watched with horrible fascination as his professional smile faltered slightly when his gaze swept the room. Those green eyes found hers with laser precision, and she saw his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "Thank you, Mother," Daniel said, his voice perfectly controlled. "I'm looking forward to getting to know the Innovative Solutions team and learning about your unique approaches to client engagement." His eyes stayed on Emma for just a moment longer than appropriate, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks. Several of her colleagues had noticed the exchange and were looking between them curiously. The presentation continued with discussions of integration timelines, resource sharing, and maintaining company culture. But Emma absorbed none of it. She was too busy planning escape routes and considering whether it was too late to flee to another state. We'll be conducting individual meetings with key team members over the next few weeks, Catherine was saying. Daniel will be reaching out to schedule those conversations. The meeting concluded with polite applause and mingling, but Emma made a beeline for the door. She almost made it. Emma Clark. The voice stopped her cold 3 steps from freedom. She turned slowly to find Daniel Sterling standing directly behind her, having somehow crossed the room without her noticing. "Mr. Sterling," she said, proud that her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "Interesting career move," he said, those green eyes unreadable. "I thought you were leaving marketing entirely." Several of her colleagues were within earshot, watching the interaction with poorly concealed curiosity. Emma lifted her chin. "I found a better opportunity. Sometimes that requires changing companies." "Indeed." Daniel's smile was sharp enough to cut. "I look forward to our individual meeting. I have some questions about your previous experience and how it might translate to our expanded operations." Emma's stomach dropped. "I'm sure Sarah can handle any questions about my role here. Oh, I'll be speaking with Sarah as well. But you and I have a unique history, don't we? It would be a shame not to leverage that familiarity." The word leverage made Emma's skin crawl. This was exactly what she'd feared. Daniel using their past relationship to make her life difficult again. But she was older now, more confident, and she had a supportive team around her. "I suppose we do have history," Emma agreed, her voice carrying just enough edge to let him know she wasn't the same intimidated employee he remembered. "I'm sure we'll find it illuminating to discuss how perspectives can change." Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly, clearly surprised by her response. Before he could reply, Sarah appeared at Emma's elbow. "Mr. Sterling, I hope Emma's been able to give you some insight into our team dynamics. She's been a fantastic addition to our company." "I'm sure she has," Daniel said, his gaze still fixed on Emma. "We were just discussing the value of fresh perspectives." "Absolutely," Sarah agreed enthusiastically. Emma brought such innovative ideas from her previous marketing experience. We're lucky to have her. Emma watched Daniel's expression carefully, looking for signs of the dismissive attitude she remembered. But his face remained professionally neutral, giving nothing away. "Well," Emma said, "I should get back to work. The Morrison project needs attention." She had the satisfaction of seeing genuine surprise flicker across Daniel's features. The Morrison account had been one of Sterling Marketing's biggest challenges, and Emma had been assigned to it just before quitting. "The Morrison project?" Daniel asked. "Innovative Solutions acquired the account last month," Sarah explained. "Emma's been leading the strategy overhaul. The preliminary results are very promising." Emma couldn't resist adding, "Sometimes a fresh perspective is exactly what a challenging account needs." Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly, clearly catching her subtle reference to their last conversation. "I'm sure it is. I look forward to reviewing the results." With that, Emma excused herself and walked back to her desk, leaving Daniel Sterling standing in the conference room. She could feel his eyes following her, but she refused to look back. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jess. "Rumor is that Sterling Marketing's being integrated too. Something about synergies with other companies in the parent organization. Could be interesting." Emma stared at the message, a terrible suspicion forming. If Sterling Marketing was being integrated with other Sterling Enterprises subsidiaries, and Daniel was overseeing strategic operations, then he might have significant influence over Innovative Solutions' future. She looked across the office at her colleagues, all excited about new opportunities and resources. They had no idea that their creative freedom might be at the mercy of a man who valued control over collaboration. Emma opened her laptop and began working on the Morrison presentation with renewed focus. If Daniel Sterling wanted to review her work, she'd make sure it was absolutely flawless. She'd proven once that she could succeed despite his negativity. Now she might have to prove it again, except this time the stakes were much higher. This time, it wasn't just her career on the line. It was the future of a company culture she'd grown to love, and colleagues who'd become friends. Daniel Sterling might have more power now, but Emma Clark was no longer the insecure employee who'd fled his criticism. She was ready for whatever game he wanted to play. The individual meeting request arrived the next morning, scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. in Conference Room B. Emma stared at the calendar invitation, noting that Daniel had given her exactly 48 hours to stress about it. Classic power move, though whether intentional or coincidental remained to be seen. "You've been staring at that email for 5 minutes, Tom observed, wheeling his chair over to her desk. "Either it's very good news or very bad news." "Jury's still out," Emma muttered, closing her laptop. "Want to grab lunch? I need to get out of here for a bit." They walked to the small cafe across the street, where Emma had been enjoying peaceful lunch breaks for exactly 2 weeks. Now even this simple pleasure felt tainted by the knowledge that Daniel Sterling was somewhere in the same corporate ecosystem. "Okay, spill," Tom said, settling into their usual corner booth. "You've been weird since Monday's meeting, and don't tell me it's just adjustment anxiety. I saw you and that Sterling guy staring at each other like old enemies." Emma picked at her sandwich, debating how much to reveal. "We worked together before. It didn't end well." "Ah." Tom nodded knowingly. "Bad breakup." "Worse. Bad boss." Tom's expression shifted to understanding, then sympathy. "Oh, Emma, he was the one who made you miserable at your last job?" 3 years of psychological warfare disguised as professional development. Emma finally managed a bite of food. "And now he's probably going to have input on our company's future. That sucks. But you know what? You're not the same person who left that job. Look how you've thrived here, how confident you've become. Maybe it's time to show him exactly what he lost." Emma considered this. Tom had a point. The Emma who'd worked at Sterling Marketing had been constantly second-guessing herself, walking on eggshells, accepting criticism that was often unfounded. The Emma who worked at Innovative Solutions trusted her instincts, spoke up in meetings, and took creative risks that paid off. "You're right," she said slowly. "I am different now. Maybe this is actually an opportunity to prove something." "That's the spirit. Besides, he's probably learned some management skills since then. People can change." Emma doubted that very much, but she appreciated Tom's optimism. Thursday would reveal whether Daniel Sterling had evolved or if he was still the same controlling perfectionist who'd made her doubt her own abilities. Thursday afternoon arrived with unseasonable warmth, and Emma chose her outfit carefully. Professional, but not trying too hard. Confident, but not aggressive. She wanted to project competence and self-assurance, the image of someone who'd found her place in the world. Conference Room B was smaller and more intimate than the large meeting space, with a round table that eliminated hierarchical seating arrangements. Emma arrived exactly on time to find Daniel already there, reviewing what appeared to be her personnel file. "Emma," he said, standing when she entered, "thank you for making time." "Of course." Emma took a seat directly across from him, maintaining eye contact. "I understand these meetings are part of the integration process." Daniel closed the file and leaned back in his chair, studying her with those disconcerting green eyes. "Partly. I'm also curious about your transition to Innovative Solutions. It's quite a career shift from Sterling Marketing." "Not really. I'm still doing marketing strategy, just in a more collaborative environment." "Collaborative?" Daniel repeated the word as if testing its flavor. "And how would you describe your previous work environment?" Emma met his gaze steadily. "Hierarchical, traditional, focused on individual achievement rather than team success." "I see. And you found that limiting?" "I found it counterproductive. The best ideas come from open dialogue and creative freedom, not from fear of criticism." Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Criticism can be a valuable tool for growth when delivered constructively. Absolutely, Emma agreed. When it's constructive. When it includes specific suggestions for improvement. When it's delivered with respect for the person receiving it. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken history. Finally, Daniel opened a different folder. "I've been reviewing your work on the Morrison account," he said. "The results are impressive." Emma blinked, surprised. "Thank you. The strategy shows real innovation. The client engagement increased 40% in just 3 weeks." Daniel looked up from the papers. "How did you approach the challenge?" This was dangerous territory. The Morrison account had been Emma's last assignment at Sterling Marketing, the one Daniel had given her right before she'd quit. He had to remember. "I started by identifying why the previous approach wasn't working," Emma said carefully. "The messaging was too corporate, too distant. Morrison Industries needed to connect with their audience on an emotional level, not just showcase technical specifications. And the previous strategy was too focused on features rather than benefits." Exactly. "We shifted to storytelling, highlighting how their products improve people's lives rather than just listing capabilities." Daniel nodded slowly. The previous strategy at Sterling Marketing took a different approach. There it was, the elephant in the room. Emma straightened her shoulders. The previous strategy wasn't working. Morrison was considering ending their contract. Were they? Daniel's tone was neutral, but Emma caught the hint of challenge. Yes, their engagement metrics were declining consistently, and they'd expressed frustration with the lack of fresh ideas. Emma pulled out her tablet and called up the data. "Here are the numbers from the past 6 months. The downward trend was clear." Daniel studied the charts, his expression unreadable. Emma watched him process the information, seeing the exact moment when he recognized that she was right. The Morrison account had been failing under his company's management. "This analysis is thorough," he admitted. "It's accurate," Emma corrected. "And it informed a strategy that's actually working." Daniel set down the tablet and looked at her directly. "You sound different than I remember." "I am different than you remember. More confident. More appreciated." Emma let the words hang in the air between them. It's amazing what supportive leadership can do for someone's performance. Another silence, this one crackling with tension. Daniel's green eyes searched her face, as if looking for traces of the uncertain employee he'd once known. "Sarah speaks very highly of your contributions here," he said finally. "Sarah values creative input and trusts her team to do their jobs well. It's a refreshing management style. And you feel that your previous supervisor didn't trust you?" Emma laughed, a sound with very little humor in it. "Mr. Sterling, my previous supervisor, made it clear that he considered my ideas amateur and my instincts questionable. It's hard to perform your best when your boss actively undermines your confidence." Daniel's expression shifted, showing what might have been discomfort. "I'm sure he believed he was helping you improve." "Did he?" Because from where I sat, it felt more like he enjoyed demonstrating his superiority than actually developing his employees' skills. The words hung in the air like an accusation, which Emma supposed they were. Daniel's jaw tightened, and she could see him struggling with how to respond. "Perhaps," he said slowly. "There were communication issues on both sides." Emma tilted her head. "Communication issues? Is that what we're calling it?" "Emma." Daniel's voice carried a warning note that she remembered all too well. "It's Miss Clark, actually. We're not colleagues anymore." Emma stood up, signaling that she considered the meeting over. "Is there anything else you need to know about my work here?" Daniel remained seated, looking up at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "We'll be having regular check-ins as the integration proceeds. I'll be keeping a close eye on all strategic accounts." "Of course you will," Emma said, moving toward the door. Some things never change. She left him sitting in the conference room, feeling both victorious and exhausted. The confrontation had been inevitable, and she'd held her ground better than she'd expected. But Emma knew this was just the opening round, in what could become a very long and difficult game. As she walked back to her desk, Emma caught Sarah watching her with concern. "How did it go?" Sarah asked quietly. Emma forced a smile. "About as well as expected. I think we understand each other." "Good. I was worried there might be some awkwardness since you worked together before." "Oh, there's definitely awkwardness," Emma said, "but I can handle it." She hoped she was right. The awkwardness Emma had mentioned to Sarah became a daily reality over the following weeks. Daniel Sterling seemed to materialize everywhere, reviewing projects, sitting in on meetings, and generally making his presence felt throughout innovative solutions. Emma found herself constantly aware of where he was and what he was doing, like tracking a dangerous weather system. "He's actually not that bad," whispered Kelly from accounting during their morning coffee run. "I mean, he's intense, but he really knows his stuff. Did you see how he restructured the Peterson account? Brilliant." Emma stirred her latte with more force than necessary. Brilliant wasn't the word she'd used to describe Daniel's management style, but she had to admit that his strategic insights were usually sound. The problem wasn't his competence, it was his delivery. He asked really thoughtful questions about our client retention strategies, added Marcus from business development. Made me think about things from angles I hadn't considered. Emma bit her tongue. Of course, Daniel was being thoughtful and considerate with everyone else. She was probably the only one experiencing his particular brand of professional hostility. "Emma?" Sarah appeared at her elbow. "Daniel wants to see you in his office. Something about the Morrison progress report." Emma's stomach dropped. Daniel had been assigned a temporary office on the executive floor, a space that felt foreign and intimidating compared to the open, collaborative atmosphere of the main workspace. "His office?" Emma asked. "We don't usually hold meetings up there." Sarah shrugged. "I think he wanted privacy to discuss some specific details. You know how executives are about confidential strategy stuff." Emma knew exactly how this particular executive was about control and power dynamics. Meeting in his office was a deliberate choice, designed to put her at a disadvantage. But she was no longer the easily intimidated employee he'd once known. The executive floor was decorated in the same warm, creative style as the rest of the building, but the offices were larger and more private. Emma found Daniel's temporary space at the end of the hall, door open, but clearly separated from the collaborative energy below. "You wanted to see me?" Emma asked from the doorway. Daniel looked up from his computer, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Come in, close the door. We need to discuss the Morrison timeline." Emma reluctantly closed the door, but remained standing. "What about the timeline?" "Sit down, Emma." "I'm fine standing, thanks. What's the issue?" Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly at her refusal to follow his instruction, but he didn't push it. "The Morrison Industries CEO wants to accelerate the campaign launch. They're moving their product release up by 6 weeks. Emma's mind immediately started calculating the implications. 6 weeks? That's going to require significant resource reallocation and overtime for the creative team. Agreed. That's why I wanted to discuss this privately before involving the rest of the team. Daniel leaned back in his chair. What's your honest assessment of feasibility? Emma studied his expression, looking for signs of the trap she was certain existed. Honestly, it's doable, but not ideal. The creative team will need to compress their development timeline, which could impact quality. We'd also need to pull people from other projects. Which projects would you prioritize? This felt like a test, though Emma couldn't figure out what the right answer was supposed to be. The Henderson account is still in early stages, so we could delay their timeline by a few weeks without major impact. The coastal properties project is more advanced, but their deadline isn't until next quarter. Daniel nodded, making notes. What about staffing? We'd need all hands on Morrison for the next month. I'd recommend bringing in freelancers for overflow work on other accounts, rather than compromising the Morrison quality. That increases costs. It maintains client satisfaction and team morale. The cost of rushing internal staff and producing subpar work is higher than the freelancer fees. Daniel set down his pen and looked at her directly. That's good strategic thinking. Emma blinked, surprised. Thank you. You've always been good at seeing the big picture, even when... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Even when circumstances weren't ideal. Was Daniel Sterling actually admitting that working conditions at Sterling Marketing hadn't been ideal? Emma stared at him, unsure how to respond. I'll need you to present this timeline proposal to the team tomorrow, Daniel continued. Can you have a detailed breakdown ready by then? Of course. Emma turned to leave, then paused. Can I ask you something? Daniel raised an eyebrow. What? Why are you involving me in the strategic decisions? Sarah's the creative director. This seems like her call. Daniel was quiet for a moment, his green eyes unreadable. Because you know this account better than anyone. You've invested yourself in understanding Morrison's needs and building relationships with their team. It makes sense to leverage that knowledge. Leverage. There was that word again. But this time, it didn't feel like a threat. Plus, Daniel added, his voice slightly softer, you've proven that you can handle complex strategic challenges. I'd be foolish not to utilize that capability. Emma felt off balance, like she'd prepared for one conversation and walked into a completely different one. This version of Daniel seemed almost reasonable. I'll have the timeline ready, she said. Emma. Daniel's voice stopped her at the door. For what it's worth, the work you've done on Morrison is exceptional. The client is genuinely impressed with the turnaround. Emma studied his face, looking for sarcasm or hidden meaning, but his expression seemed sincere. Thank you, she said finally. That means something. After Emma left, Daniel stared at the closed door for a long time. Seeing her again had been jarring enough, but watching her work at Innovative Solutions had been a revelation. The confident, creative professional leading strategy meetings bore little resemblance to the hesitant employee he remembered from Sterling Marketing. Had she really been that talented before, and he'd simply failed to see it? Or had something about working here brought out capabilities that hadn't been evident earlier? Daniel pulled up Emma's old performance reviews from Sterling Marketing, documents he'd written himself. Reading them now, he cringed at the language he'd used. Needs improvement in strategic thinking. Lacks confidence in presenting ideas. Requires more direct supervision to maintain quality standards. But the Emma Clark working on the Morrison account demonstrated exactly the strategic thinking and confident leadership he'd claimed she lacked, which meant either she'd dramatically improved in a matter of weeks, or his assessments had been fundamentally flawed. The possibility that he'd been wrong about Emma's capabilities was uncomfortable enough. The possibility that his management style had actively hindered her performance was worse. Daniel had built his reputation on identifying talent and maximizing team performance. If he'd been systematically undermining one of his most capable employees, what did that say about his leadership skills? His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. How are the Innovative Solutions integration meetings going? Any interesting discoveries? Daniel stared at the message, thinking about Emma's transformation, her obvious comfort in her new role, and the way she'd held her ground in every interaction they'd had since Monday. Still evaluating, he typed back. Some situations are more complex than they initially appeared. That was certainly true. Emma Clark was proving to be far more complex than he'd ever realized, and Daniel was beginning to suspect that said more about his limitations as a manager than hers as an employee. The Morrison timeline presentation went better than Emma had expected. The team responded positively to the accelerated schedule, and several people volunteered for overtime shifts to ensure quality wasn't compromised. Even more surprising, Daniel had attended the meeting but remained silent, letting Emma lead the discussion without interference. "You handled that really well," Sarah said afterward, as they walked back to their desks. "Daniel seemed impressed with your planning." "Did he?" Emma glanced toward the executive floor. "I couldn't tell what he was thinking. He specifically asked me about your background after the meeting. Wanted to know how long you've been doing strategic planning and where you developed those skills." Emma frowned. "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That you're naturally gifted at seeing patterns and finding solutions, and that you flourished here because we give you room to use those talents." Sarah paused. "Is there something I should know about your working relationship with him?" Emma considered how much to reveal. "Let's just say our management styles didn't mesh well at Sterling Marketing. I'm hoping the situation here will be different." "Well, whatever happened before, he clearly respects your work now. That's what matters." But Emma wasn't convinced it was that simple. Daniel's behavior had been puzzling lately, almost professional and respectful. It felt like waiting for the other shoe to drop. The shoe dropped on Friday afternoon. Emma was finalizing the Morrison creative briefs when her computer chimed with a meeting request. "Emma Clark, performance review discussion, scheduled for Monday morning at 9 a.m. in Daniel's office." Emma stared at the calendar invitation, her heart rate accelerating. Performance reviews at Sterling Marketing had been quarterly ordeals, where Daniel systematically dismantled her confidence while pretending to offer constructive feedback. She'd been at Innovative Solutions for less than a month. What could he possibly have to review? Her phone buzzed with a text from Jess. "Coffee tomorrow. I have gossip about Sterling Marketing that you'll want to hear." Emma immediately called her. "What kind of gossip?" "The kind that explains a lot about your former boss. Meet me at Grind Coffee at 10, and I'll tell you everything." Saturday morning found Emma nursing an extra-large latte while waiting for Jess to arrive. The coffee shop was busy with weekend crowds, families with children, and couples reading newspapers together. Normal people living normal lives, without corporate drama, and complicated histories with difficult bosses. "You look stressed," Jess observed, sliding into the opposite chair. "Bad week?" "Confusing week. Daniel's been almost professional. It's unsettling." Jess raised an eyebrow. "Daniel Sterling being professional? That is weird. But maybe this will explain it." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "Okay, so you know how Sterling Marketing got acquired too, right?" "Well, there's been major restructuring." "What kind of restructuring?" "The kind where Daniel's father reviewed all his performance metrics and client retention rates and wasn't happy with what he found." Jess grinned. "Apparently, Sterling Marketing has been hemorrhaging talent for the past 2 years. Exit interviews consistently cited poor management and lack of creative support." Emma nearly choked on her coffee. "Seriously. Gets better. Remember that big Peterson account that Daniel was so proud of? They terminated their contract last month, cited frustration with communication and inflexibility in strategic approach. The Peterson account was worth millions." "Exactly. And when Catherine Sterling started digging into why they were losing so many clients and employees, guess whose management style kept coming up as a problem?" Emma felt a mixture of vindication and uncomfortable sympathy. "So, he's in trouble with his mother?" "More than trouble. Word is that he's been given 6 months to demonstrate improved leadership skills and client retention, or he's going to be moved to a position with less people management responsibility." This explained so much about Daniel's recent behavior: the respectful tone, The collaborative approach, the way he deferred to her expertise in meetings. He wasn't just overseeing innovative solutions integration. He was trying to prove that he could work effectively with the kind of talented employees he'd been driving away. "There's more," Jess continued. "Apparently, your resignation letter was part of what triggered the investigation. Catherine Sterling specifically mentioned the loss of high-performing employees as a red flag." Emma stared at her friend. "My resignation triggered this?" "Your resignation and the way you handled it. Professional, dignified, no drama. Made it clear that the problem wasn't your performance or attitude. When Catherine looked at your track record and the projects you'd worked on, then compared that to Daniel's assessment of your work," Jess shrugged. "Let's just say the numbers didn't add up." Emma leaned back in her chair, processing this information. Her decision to leave Sterling Marketing hadn't just freed her from a toxic situation. It had apparently exposed larger problems with Daniel's leadership approach. "So now he's trying to prove he can be a better manager," Emma mused. "And you, my friend, are probably his test case. If he can work successfully with someone he previously had conflicts with, it demonstrates growth and adaptability." Emma laughed, though there wasn't much humor in it. "So, I'm his redemption project." "Maybe. But here's the thing, Em. You don't owe him that redemption. You already proved you could succeed despite his poor management. You don't have to help him learn how to be a better boss." Jess was right, of course. Emma had no obligation to make Daniel's performance improvement easier. But as she walked home from the coffee shop, she found herself thinking about the changes she'd observed in his behavior. The respectful tone in meetings, the way he'd acknowledged her expertise on the Morrison account, the absence of the dismissive attitude that had characterized their previous working relationship. People could change, though it usually required significant motivation. And apparently, Daniel had plenty of motivation in the form of career consequences and parental disappointment. The question was whether Emma wanted to be part of that change process or simply protect herself from any potential backsliding into old patterns. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Emma's mood as she made her way to Daniel's office. She'd spent the weekend alternating between anger at being used as his test case and curiosity about whether his apparent growth was genuine. "Good morning," Daniel said when she knocked on his open door. "Please, sit down." Emma noticed he'd said please, another small change from his previous dictatorial style. She sat across from his desk, maintaining eye contact and trying to project confidence. "I wanted to discuss your integration into the Sterling Enterprises structure," Daniel began. "How are you finding the transition?" "Smooth so far. The resource sharing and expanded client base have been beneficial." Daniel nodded, making notes. "And your working relationships with the expanded team?" "Positive. Everyone's been welcoming and collaborative." "Including with me?" The direct question caught Emma off guard. She studied Daniel's expression, looking for signs of a trap, but saw only genuine curiosity. "Our working relationship has been professional," she said carefully. "That's diplomatic." Daniel set down his pen. "Emma, I know our previous working relationship was difficult. I'd like to understand what I can do differently to ensure our current collaboration is more productive." Emma blinked. Was Daniel Sterling actually asking for feedback on his management style? "You want my honest opinion?" "I do." Emma took a deep breath. "Your previous approach was very hierarchical. Ideas flowed in one direction. Criticism was frequent, and often not constructive, and there wasn't much room for creative input from team members." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly, but he nodded. "And now?" "Now you seem more willing to listen to different perspectives and acknowledge expertise where it exists. The collaborative approach is much more effective." "I see." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Is there anything specific I should continue doing or avoid doing as we move forward?" This was surreal. Emma had never imagined having this conversation with Daniel Sterling, and she wasn't sure how to navigate it. "Trust your team's judgment," she said finally. "Provide guidance when needed, but don't micromanage. And remember that criticism is most effective when it includes specific suggestions for improvement." Daniel nodded, continuing to take notes. "Anything else?" Emma hesitated, then decided to be completely honest. "Don't use our past working relationship as leverage in current situations. What happened at Sterling Marketing is history. Judge my work here on its own merits." Daniel looked up from his notes, meeting her eyes directly. "You're right. And Emma, for what it's worth, I owe you an apology for how I handled our working relationship before. My management approach was flawed, and you deserved better." Emma stared at him, speechless. In 3 years of working for Daniel Sterling, she'd never heard him admit to being wrong about anything. "Thank you," she said finally. "That means something." The apology changed everything, and nothing, all at once. Emma found herself watching Daniel differently in meetings, looking for signs that his newfound professionalism was genuine rather than performative. To her surprise, the evidence consistently supported the former. When the Morrison campaign launched 2 weeks ahead of the revised schedule, Daniel made sure the entire creative team received recognition at the company-wide meeting. When a client expressed concerns about a different project, he consulted with the assigned team lead rather than imposing his own solution. When deadline pressures mounted on the Henderson account, he approved bringing in additional freelance support without questioning the budget implications. "He's like a completely different person," Tom observed over lunch. "Remember how everyone used to dread presenting to executives? Now people actually volunteer to update him on their projects." Emma pushed salad around her plate, still processing the transformation. "People can change, I guess, given the right motivation." "You don't sound convinced." "I'm cautiously optimistic. But 3 years of one kind of behavior doesn't disappear overnight. I'm waiting to see how he handles real pressure or conflict." That test came sooner than expected. The Coastal Properties account, one of Innovative Solutions' oldest clients, exploded into crisis on a Thursday afternoon. Their new product launch had been plagued by manufacturing delays, negative social media reviews, and now a competitor's lawsuit alleging patent infringement. Coastal's CEO was threatening to terminate their contract and blame the marketing strategy for failing to anticipate potential problems. Sarah called an emergency meeting for 4 p.m., gathering the entire Coastal Properties team, plus Daniel as executive oversight. The conference room felt tense as everyone filed in, aware that this crisis could impact several jobs and the company's reputation. "Okay, people," Sarah began. "We have a situation. Coastal Properties is in full damage control mode, and their CEO is looking for someone to blame. We need a strategy that addresses the immediate crisis while protecting our ongoing relationship." "What exactly are they accusing us of?" asked Jennifer from PR. "Failure to conduct adequate market research, inadequate competitive analysis, and poor risk assessment." Sarah's voice was grim. "Basically, they're saying we should have foreseen and prevented all of these problems." Emma felt her stomach clench. She'd been the lead strategist on the Coastal Properties market research, and while she was confident in her work, client panic could make even solid analysis look inadequate in retrospect. "That's unreasonable," said Marcus. "We can't predict manufacturing delays or anticipate lawsuits that may or may not have merit." "Unreasonable, yes. But they're scared and looking for someone to blame," Sarah replied. "Daniel, what's your take on this?" All eyes turned to Daniel, who had been quietly reviewing the project files during the discussion. Emma held her breath, waiting to see if pressure would revert him to his old pattern of finding fault and assigning blame. "First," Daniel said calmly, "let's separate the legitimate concerns from the panic-driven accusations. Manufacturing delays and patent disputes are operational issues, not marketing strategy problems. However, we should review our competitive analysis to see if there were warning signs we missed. Emma relaxed slightly. He was being analytical rather than reactive. Second, Daniel continued, we need to focus on solutions rather than defensiveness. What can we do right now to help Coastal Properties navigate this crisis? Crisis communication strategy, Emma found herself saying. Get ahead of the narrative instead of just responding to problems. Show leadership and transparency rather than deflection and excuses. Daniel nodded. Exactly. Emma, can you draft a preliminary crisis communication plan? Something that acknowledges the challenges without accepting blame for operational issues beyond our control. I can have something ready by tomorrow morning. Good. Jennifer, I need you to analyze the social media situation and recommend specific response strategies. Marcus, review our competitive analysis and identify any gaps that we should address. Daniel was in full problem-solving mode, delegating effectively and focusing on actionable solutions. Emma found herself impressed despite her lingering skepticism. What about the CEO's accusations? Sarah asked. We can't just ignore the fact that they're threatening to terminate our contract. Daniel's expression grew more serious. I'll handle that conversation directly. Catherine Sterling and I will meet with their executive team tomorrow afternoon. We need to address their concerns while standing behind our team's work. Emma felt a flicker of gratitude. Daniel was positioning himself as the buffer between an angry client and the creative team, taking responsibility for managing the fallout. The meeting dispersed with everyone focused on their assigned tasks. Emma was gathering her notes when Daniel approached her. Emma, can I speak with you privately? She followed him to his office, wondering if he was going to reveal concerns about her work that he hadn't wanted to voice in front of the team. I reviewed the Coastal Properties market research you conducted, Daniel began, closing the door behind them. It's thorough and well documented. Their current crisis doesn't reflect any failure in your analysis. Emma blinked. Thank you. I was worried you might think, I think you did exactly what you were hired to do and did it well. The client is understandably upset, but they're directing their frustration at the wrong target. Daniel's expression was serious but supportive. I want you to know that I'll be making that clear in tomorrow's meeting. You don't have to defend my work. It should speak for itself. It does speak for itself, to anyone who reviews it objectively. But angry clients aren't always objective, and I won't let them scapegoat you for problems that have nothing to do with your strategy. Emma stared at him, remembering all the times at Sterling Marketing when he'd left her to defend her own work against unreasonable criticism. This protective stance was so different from his previous approach that she hardly knew how to respond. I appreciate that, she said finally. Emma. Daniel's voice was quieter now. I know I have a lot to make up for in terms of how I've managed team relationships in the past. This situation with Coastal Properties is exactly the kind of challenge where I used to look for someone to blame rather than focusing on solutions. I'm trying to do better. You are doing better, Emma admitted. The way you handled that meeting, the focus on problem-solving rather than fault-finding, it was good leadership. Something shifted in Daniel's expression, relief mixed with what might have been gratitude. Thank you. That means more than you know. As Emma left his office, she found herself genuinely hoping that Daniel's meeting with Coastal Properties would go well. Not just for the sake of the account or her own job security, but because she was starting to believe that his transformation might be real. The old Daniel Sterling would have used this crisis as an opportunity to demonstrate his authority and find someone to blame. The new version was shielding his team from client anger while working to solve the actual problems. Maybe, Emma thought, people really could change when the stakes were high enough and the motivation was strong enough. Daniel Sterling was learning to be the kind of leader she'd wished he could be 3 years ago. The question now was whether this new dynamic between them was purely professional, or if something else was developing beneath the surface of their careful workplace interactions. The coastal properties crisis resolution exceeded everyone's expectations. Daniel's meeting with their executive team resulted not only in preserving the contract, but in expanding their engagement to include crisis management consulting for the duration of their legal battles. More importantly for Emma, Daniel had publicly praised her market research and strategic thinking, making it clear that the crisis stemmed from operational issues rather than marketing failures. "You should have seen him," Sarah told Emma over coffee the next morning. "Completely professional, but absolutely fierce in defending our work. I've never seen an executive go to bat for their team like that." Emma stirred her latte thoughtfully. "It's a different side of him, that's for sure." "Different how? I thought you said you worked well together before." Emma realized she'd never told Sarah the full truth about her previous working relationship with Daniel. "It's complicated. Let's just say he's grown a lot as a leader." The success of the coastal properties situation seemed to energize the entire office. Daniel's collaborative approach and team protective stance had earned him genuine respect from employees who'd initially been wary of corporate oversight. Emma found herself relaxing around him, their interactions becoming more natural and less fraught with historical tension, which made it particularly jarring when everything changed again on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Emma was finishing up the quarterly strategy report when her computer chimed with an urgent meeting request. "All hands meeting. Immediate. Conference room A." No explanation, no agenda, just the kind of summons that made everyone's stomach drop. The entire Innovative Solutions team filed into the conference room, murmuring nervously among themselves. Daniel stood at the front of the room with an expression Emma couldn't read, holding a folder that looked ominously official. "Thank you all for gathering on short notice," Daniel began. "I received some news this afternoon that affects everyone here, and I wanted to share it immediately rather than let rumors spread." Emma felt her chest tighten. This sounded like layoffs or restructuring, the kind of corporate announcement that destroyed the collaborative culture they'd all grown to love. "As you know, Sterling Enterprises has been evaluating our operations as part of the integration process. Based on performance metrics, client satisfaction scores, and growth projections, they've made a decision about Innovative Solutions' future." The room was so quiet Emma could hear her own heartbeat. "Effective immediately, Innovative Solutions will be designated as Sterling Enterprises' flagship creative agency. You'll be receiving increased funding, expanded office space, and first priority on high-value client assignments." The silence stretched for another moment before the implications sank in. Then the room erupted in cheers and applause. Emma found herself grinning as Tom high-fived her, and Sarah started happy crying. "There's more," Daniel continued, raising his voice over the celebration. "Because of your exceptional performance and innovative approaches, Sterling Enterprises wants to replicate this model across their other creative subsidiaries. Sarah will be promoted to Regional Creative Director, overseeing similar teams in 3 other cities." More cheers, more applause. Emma felt genuinely happy for Sarah, who deserved the recognition and opportunity. "Which brings me to the final announcement," Daniel said, his eyes finding Emma's across the room. "Emma Clark will be taking over as Creative Director for Innovative Solutions, effective next month." Emma's world tilted sideways. Creative Director? She'd been there less than 2 months, and Daniel was recommending her for Sarah's position. "I didn't apply for that job," she said, her voice carrying over the congratulations from her colleagues. "I know," Daniel replied. "I recommended you based on your strategic thinking, leadership capabilities, and the results you've achieved since joining our team. The promotion comes with a significant salary increase and equity options." Emma stared at him, trying to process what was happening. This was the kind of career opportunity she'd dreamed about. but it felt surreal to have it offered by the same man who'd once convinced her she wasn't management material. After the meeting dispersed, Emma found herself alone with Daniel in the conference room, her colleagues having departed to celebrate at the bar down the street. "You recommended me for promotion," she said, still trying to wrap her mind around it. "I recommended the best person for the job," Daniel corrected. "Your work on Morrison, your handling of the coastal properties crisis, your natural leadership in team settings. You've demonstrated every quality we need in a creative director. A few months ago, you thought I needed more direct supervision to maintain quality standards." Daniel winced. "A few months ago, I was wrong about a lot of things, including my assessment of your capabilities." Emma studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. "Why are you doing this?" "Really?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, his green eyes serious. "Because you deserve it. Because this company needs your vision and leadership. And because—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because I want to prove that I can recognize and nurture talent instead of stifling it." "So, this is about your redemption project?" "No," Daniel said firmly. "This is about your talent and what's best for this company. My personal growth is a separate issue." Emma wanted to believe him, but the timing felt too convenient. "I need to think about it." "Of course. Take as much time as you need." As Emma gathered her things to leave, Daniel spoke again. "Emma, whatever you decide about the promotion, I want you to know that working with you these past few weeks has been illuminating. You've made me a better leader, whether you intended to or not." Emma paused at the door. "People don't change because of other people, Daniel. They change because they choose to." "Maybe. But some people make that choice easier than others." Emma left the building with her mind spinning. The promotion was everything she'd worked toward, the kind of recognition and opportunity that could define her entire career. But it was being offered by a man whose professional judgment she'd learned not to trust, under circumstances that felt politically motivated. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jess. "Heard through the grapevine that you got a major promotion. Drinks to celebrate?" Emma stared at the message, realizing she didn't know whether celebration was appropriate. She'd gotten everything she thought she wanted, but it came wrapped in complications she hadn't anticipated. The biggest complication being that somewhere in the process of watching Daniel Sterling learn to be a better leader, she'd started to see him as more than just her former terrible boss. The protective way he'd handled the coastal properties crisis, his genuine efforts to collaborate rather than control, the vulnerability he'd shown in admitting his past mistakes. It was drawing her in despite every rational instinct telling her to keep her distance. Emma Clark had built her new life on independence and professional confidence. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for the man who'd once made her question her own abilities, even if he seemed to be becoming someone worthy of those feelings. Emma accepted the promotion, but not without conditions. She negotiated a 3-month trial period, input on team hiring decisions, and a clear understanding that her leadership style would be collaborative rather than hierarchical. Daniel agreed to everything without hesitation, which somehow made her more nervous rather than less. "You're overthinking this," Tom said as he helped her move into Sarah's old office. "Good job. Better pay. More authority. What's the downside?" "The downside is that my biggest supporter is also the person who spent 3 years undermining my confidence. What if this is all some elaborate mind game?" Tom set down a box of her belongings and gave her a serious look. "Em, I've watched that guy interact with you for weeks now. Whatever happened between you before, he genuinely respects your work. The mind game theory doesn't hold up." Emma wanted to believe that, but trust was harder to rebuild than professional relationships. She'd spent so many years assuming the worst of Daniel's motivations, that recognizing genuine change felt dangerous. Her first week as creative director went smoothly, helped by the fact that most of her colleagues had already been coming to her for strategic input. The transition felt natural, and Emma discovered she enjoyed the leadership responsibilities more than she'd expected. The complication came Friday afternoon when Daniel knocked on her office door. "Do you have a minute? I wanted to discuss the Phillips Industries proposal." Emma gestured to the chair across from her desk, noting how strange it felt to have Daniel seeking permission to enter her space rather than commanding her presence in his. "I've been reviewing the preliminary strategy," Daniel continued, settling into the chair. "The approach is solid, but I think we're missing an opportunity to differentiate ourselves from their current agency." Emma pulled up the proposal on her computer. "What kind of differentiation?" "Phillips Industries has been using traditional demographic targeting, but their customer base is evolving. If we could demonstrate understanding of their emerging markets, it would show strategic insight their current agency lacks." As Daniel explained his reasoning, Emma found herself genuinely engaged in the strategic discussion. His insights were sharp and creative, exactly the kind of collaborative input she valued from senior leadership. When he suggested specific research approaches, she found herself building on his ideas rather than defending against them. "That's brilliant," Emma said, making notes. "If we can show them market opportunities their current agency hasn't identified, it completely changes our value proposition." "Exactly. And you have the research skills to make that case convincingly." Emma looked up from her computer to find Daniel watching her with an expression that was definitely not purely professional. There was warmth in his green eyes, appreciation that went beyond strategic alignment. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing. Just, this is how collaboration should work, building on each other's ideas, finding solutions neither of us would have reached alone." "Is that your way of saying I should have been promoted to creative director 3 years ago?" Daniel's expression grew more serious. "My way of saying I was too focused on control to recognize the talent right in front of me. Yes, you should have been in leadership then. I should have been developing your skills instead of criticizing them." The admission hung between them, heavy with implications. Emma felt something shift in the air, a recognition that they were no longer just former colleagues working through professional differences. "Daniel," she began, then stopped, unsure what she wanted to say. "I know this is complicated," Daniel said quietly. "Our history makes everything more difficult. But Emma, I need you to know that my feelings about working with you have nothing to do with corporate politics or redemption projects." "What do they have to do with?" Daniel held her gaze steadily. "They have to do with the fact that you're brilliant, creative, and courageous enough to stand up for what you believe in. They have to do with watching you lead a team with grace and strength. They have to do with realizing that the person I thought I knew was actually someone I'd never bothered to see clearly." Emma's heart was beating too fast. "Daniel, we work together. I report to you in the corporate structure." "I know. And I would never do anything to jeopardize your position or make you uncomfortable. I'm not asking for anything, Emma. I just wanted you to know that my respect for you goes deeper than professional admiration." Before Emma could respond, her office phone rang. She answered automatically, grateful for the interruption and the excuse to break the intense eye contact. "Emma Clark." "Emma, it's Catherine Sterling. Do you have a moment to speak privately?" Emma's stomach dropped. Daniel's mother calling her directly couldn't be good news. "Of course, Mrs. Sterling." "Excellent. I'm in the building and would like to meet with you in the executive conference room. Is now convenient?" Emma glanced at Daniel, who looked equally puzzled. "I'll be right there." After hanging up, Emma turned to Daniel. "Your mother wants to see me. Any idea why?" "None. But she wouldn't call a meeting like this unless it was important." Daniel stood up. "Do you want me to come with you?" "No, I should handle this myself. If I'm going to be creative director, I need to be able to manage executive relationships independently." Daniel nodded, though he looked concerned. "If you need anything, call me immediately." Emma made her way to the executive conference room, her mind racing through possible reasons for Catherine Sterling's unexpected visit. The quarterly reviews weren't due for another month, and Emma's promotion had already been approved. This felt like something bigger. Catherine Sterling was exactly as intimidating as Emma remembered, silver hair perfectly styled, and sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. She gestured for Emma to sit across from her at the polished conference table. "Thank you for meeting on short notice, Emma. I wanted to discuss your new role and some observations I've made about your working relationship with my son." Emma's heart sank. Someone had reported the conversation she'd just had with Daniel, or maybe their collaborative dynamic had been misinterpreted as something inappropriate. "Mrs. Sterling, I want to assure you that my relationship with Daniel is completely professional. If there's been any suggestion otherwise—" Catherine raised a hand, stopping Emma mid-sentence. "My dear, you've misunderstood why I'm here. I'm not concerned about impropriety. I'm interested in results." Emma blinked. "Results?" "Daniel's performance over the past 2 months has been the best of his career. His team leadership scores have improved dramatically. Client satisfaction is up 30%, and employee retention in his departments has stabilized after 2 years of decline." Emma wasn't sure where this was going. "That's wonderful news." "It is. And according to my analysis, these improvements correlate directly with his increased collaboration with you." Catherine leaned forward slightly. "Daniel has always been brilliant strategically, but he's struggled with people management. Something about working with you has changed that. I think he's just committed to improving his leadership style." "Perhaps. But commitment requires motivation, and motivation often requires inspiration." Catherine's smile was knowing. "I've seen the way he looks at you in meetings, Emma. And more importantly, I've seen the way you challenge him to be better than he was." Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm not sure what you're suggesting." "I'm suggesting that Daniel has found something here worth protecting and improving for. Whether that's professional pride, personal growth, or something more intimate is none of my business. What matters to me is that he's finally becoming the leader I always knew he could be." Catherine stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. "Congratulations on your promotion, Emma. I expect great things from your leadership, and if my son is smart enough to appreciate what he has in you, well, that would be the best business decision he's ever made." As Catherine left the conference room, Emma sat alone, trying to process what had just happened. Daniel's mother had essentially given her blessing to whatever was developing between them, while simultaneously putting enormous pressure on Emma to continue inspiring Daniel's growth. Emma walked back to her office slowly, her mind spinning with implications. She'd built her new life on independence and professional achievement. Getting involved with Daniel Sterling, no matter how much he'd changed, felt like risking everything she'd worked to build. But as she passed his office and saw him concentrating on his computer, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. The man she was getting to know bore little resemblance to the boss who'd once made her miserable. This Daniel was collaborative, supportive, and genuinely interested in her thoughts and feelings. The question was whether she was brave enough to find out where those feelings might lead. Emma avoided Daniel for the rest of the day, claiming urgent client calls and strategic planning deadlines. But Friday evening found her alone in her office, staring at budget projections, while her mind wandered to Catherine Sterling's words and the look in Daniel's eyes when he'd talked about his feelings going deeper than professional admiration. A soft knock on her door interrupted her brooding. "Come in," she called, expecting the cleaning crew. Instead, Daniel appeared in her doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee, and looking uncertain. I brought caffeine, peace offering for whatever I said earlier that made you disappear. Emma gestured to the chair across from her desk. You didn't say anything wrong. It's just complicated. Everything about this situation is complicated, Daniel agreed, settling into the chair and sliding one coffee cup toward her. But I think we've been handling complicated pretty well lately. Emma accepted the coffee gratefully, noting that he'd remembered exactly how she liked it. Your mother came to see me this afternoon. Daniel's expression shifted to concern. What did she want? To tell me that your improved performance correlates with working more closely with me. She seems to think I'm good for your leadership development. She's not wrong, Daniel said quietly. You have made me a better leader, a better person, actually. That's not my job, Daniel. I'm not responsible for your personal growth. No, you're not. But that doesn't change the fact that you've inspired it. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Emma, I know our history makes this weird. I know there are power dynamics and professional complications. But I also know that what I feel for you is real and has nothing to do with corporate structures or redemption projects. Emma stared into her coffee cup, avoiding his gaze. What you feel for me might be gratitude or admiration for someone who challenged you to change. That's not the same thing as actual feelings. You think I can't tell the difference? I think people can confuse appreciation with attraction, especially in high-pressure situations where someone helps them grow. Daniel was quiet for a moment. What would convince you that what I feel is real? Emma looked up at him then, seeing vulnerability in his expression that she'd never witnessed before. Time, maybe. Consistency. Proof that you value me as a person, not just as a catalyst for your improvement. How much time? I don't know. As long as it takes for me to trust that this version of you is permanent, not just convenient. Daniel nodded slowly. I can work with that timeline. But Emma, can I ask you something? What? Do you feel anything for me? Separate from our professional relationship and our complicated history. Is there any part of you that's interested in finding out what we could be together? Emma's heart was beating too fast again. The honest answer was yes. Absolutely yes. The Daniel Sterling she'd been working with for the past 2 months was intelligent, protective, collaborative, and increasingly attractive. But admitting that felt like stepping off a cliff with no guarantee of safe landing. I might, she said carefully. But I need to know that you respect my boundaries and my need to take this slowly. I do respect that, completely. And I need to know that if this doesn't work out romantically, it won't affect our working relationship or my position here. Daniel's expression grew serious. Emma, I swear to you that your job security and professional reputation are completely separate from any personal feelings between us. You've earned your position through your own merit, and nothing will change that. Emma studied his face, looking for any sign of insincerity. But Daniel's gaze was steady and earnest, and she found herself wanting to believe him. Okay, she said finally. But we go slow, really slow, and we keep our personal relationship completely separate from work. Daniel's smile was like sunrise. As slow as you want, and completely separate from work. Good. Now finish your coffee and get out of my office. I have actual work to do. Daniel laughed, but he did as she asked, pausing only at the doorway to look back at her. Emma, thank you for giving this a chance, for giving me a chance to prove that I'm not the same person who made you miserable. Don't thank me yet, Emma replied. Prove it first. After Daniel left, Emma sat in her office thinking about the risk she was taking. Dating someone in her corporate chain of command was complicated enough without their shared history of conflict. But the man who just asked for a chance to prove himself bore little resemblance to the boss who'd once undermined her confidence. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jess. "Heard you got promoted to creative director? Drinks tomorrow to celebrate?" Emma typed back, "Definitely. And I have some interesting news to share." Good interesting or bad interesting? Emma looked toward Daniel's office, where she could see him working late under his desk lamp, and felt a flutter of nervous excitement. "To be determined," she replied. The following weeks established a pattern that surprised Emma with how natural it felt. At work, she and Daniel maintained strict professionalism, collaborating on strategy and client management without any hint of personal involvement. After hours, they began tentatively exploring the possibility of something more. Their first official date was coffee on a Saturday morning, neutral territory, where they could talk without the weight of corporate hierarchy. Emma had expected awkwardness, but conversation flowed easily once they moved beyond work topics. Daniel talked about his love of sailing and his complicated relationship with family expectations. Emma shared her passion for travel photography and her dream of eventually freelancing while exploring different countries. "I never knew you wanted to travel," Daniel said, stirring his latte. "What's stopping you?" "Security, mostly. Steady paycheck, health insurance, the usual practical concerns." Emma smiled wryly. "Plus, it's hard to take career risks when you've spent years having your professional judgment questioned." Daniel winced. "I really did a number on your confidence, didn't I?" "You did. But I'm rebuilding it. And it's stronger than before because it's based on actual achievements rather than someone else's approval." "Good. You should never need anyone else's approval to know your worth." It was exactly the right thing to say, and Emma felt another piece of her guard drop away. Their second date was dinner at a small restaurant away from their usual haunts, where they discovered a shared love of terrible movies and competitive tendencies when it came to trivia night. Their third date was a walk along the waterfront, where Daniel admitted that he'd been attracted to her even during their difficult working relationship at Sterling Marketing. "You had this way of standing up to me that nobody else did," he said, as they watched boats in the harbor. "It was frustrating as hell, but also impressive. I think part of me knew you were right about my management style, which made your criticism even harder to hear. So you took it out on me instead of examining your own behavior. Yeah, not my finest moment." Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. "Emma, I know I can't undo the damage I did to your confidence back then, but I want you to know that every criticism I leveled at you said more about my insecurities than your actual performance." Emma looked into his green eyes, seeing sincerity and regret that seemed genuine. "I'm beginning to understand that, but it's going to take time to fully trust that you see me clearly now." "I have time," Daniel said simply, "as much as you need." Standing there in the evening light, Emma felt the last of her resistance melting away. Daniel Sterling was proving himself to be exactly the kind of man she could fall for: patient, self-aware, and committed to earning her trust rather than demanding it. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. 6 months later, Emma Clark stood in her corner office watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of gold and crimson. The view from the creative director's suite was spectacular, but it was the email on her computer screen that made her smile. Morrison Industries had just signed a 3-year contract extension, citing innovative solutions, exceptional strategic insight, and creative execution. "Celebrating alone?" Daniel's voice from her doorway made her turn around. He was leaning against the frame, his tie loosened, and sleeves rolled up after a long day of client meetings. "Just enjoying the moment," Emma replied. "Morrison's contract extension came through. Sarah's going to be thrilled when she hears." Daniel stepped into her office, closing the door behind him. "Sarah's success in the regional position has been incredible. Promoting you to replace her was the best decision we've made." "We?" Emma raised an eyebrow teasingly. I thought my promotion was entirely merit-based. It was. But I'll take credit for recognizing the merit. Daniel moved to stand beside her at the window. How was your day? Besides the Morrison celebration. Good. The Phillips Industries campaign is exceeding projections. The Henderson account is finally running smoothly, and I only had to referee one creative dispute between Tom and Jennifer. Living the management dream, Daniel said with a grin. Emma laughed. Some days. What about you? How did the board meeting go? Well, actually, Mother was particularly pleased with our quarterly numbers. Client retention is at an all-time high, employee satisfaction scores are excellent, and our profit margins have improved significantly. Emma turned to study his profile as he gazed out at the city. 6 months of working together in their new dynamic had proven that Daniel's transformation was genuine and lasting. He'd become the collaborative leader she'd always thought he could be, and watching him grow had been one of the unexpected pleasures of her new position. Earth to Emma, Daniel said, catching her staring. What are you thinking about? Just reflecting on how much things have changed. A year ago, I was planning my escape from Sterling Marketing. Now I'm running my own creative team and dating the former boss who made my life miserable. Do you regret any of it? Emma considered the question seriously. I regret that it took so long to get here. But no, I don't regret the journey. Even the difficult parts taught me things I needed to learn. Daniel turned to face her fully. What kinds of things? That I'm stronger than I thought. That I can succeed, even when people doubt me. That sometimes the best opportunities come, disguised as impossible situations. Emma met his gaze directly. That people really can change when they're motivated to do the work. Speaking of change and motivation, Daniel said, his voice taking on a slightly nervous quality. There's something I want to discuss with you. Emma felt a flutter of anxiety. What kind of something? Instead of answering immediately, Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small blue box. Emma's heart stopped. Daniel, what are you doing? Something I should have done months ago if I hadn't been so worried about rushing you. Daniel opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. Emma Clark, you've made me a better leader, a better man, and a better version of myself than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me? Emma stared at the ring, then at Daniel's hopeful expression, feeling a kaleidoscope of emotions. You're proposing in my office? I'm proposing in the place where you first challenged me to be better, where you taught me that collaboration is stronger than control, that trust is more powerful than authority. Daniel's voice was steady but emotional. This office represents everything you've built through your own talent and determination. It felt like the right place to ask you to build something new with me. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. The gesture was perfect, acknowledging her professional achievements while asking her to share a personal future. Daniel, I know our history is complicated. I know there are people who might question our relationship or your professional success. But Emma, I love you for exactly who you are, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me with your heart. Emma looked at the ring again, then at the man offering it. The Daniel Sterling kneeling in her office bore no resemblance to the boss who'd once made her doubt herself. This Daniel saw her clearly, supported her dreams, and had earned her trust through consistent actions rather than empty promises. Yes, she said softly. Yes, I'll marry you. Daniel's face lit up with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, catching the light from the setting sun and sparkling like captured fire. I love you, Emma Clark, Daniel said, standing to pull her into his arms. I love you too, Daniel Sterling, despite everything, because of everything, and for everything we're going to build together. As they kissed in her corner office, Emma thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. She'd quit her job to escape an arrogant boss and found herself falling in love with the man he'd chosen to become. It was the kind of story that sounded improbable when summarized, but had unfolded naturally through small moments of growth, understanding, and genuine connection. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jess. "Saw the Morrison contract news. Celebration drinks tonight." Emma smiled against Daniel's lips, thinking about how much she had to celebrate. Professional success, personal happiness, and a future full of possibilities she was excited to explore. "Rain check on those celebration drinks," Emma typed back. "I have even bigger news to share tomorrow." Outside her window, the city sparkled with light as day faded into evening. Somewhere out there, another ambitious woman might be working late, dreaming of the career and recognition she deserved. Another demanding boss might be learning that leadership meant lifting people up rather than tearing them down. Emma Clark had found her happy ending, but more importantly, she'd found herself. The confidence, creativity, and courage that had always been part of her were now unshakable foundations for whatever adventures lay ahead. And the best part was, she'd be sharing those adventures with someone who saw her exactly as she was and loved her completely for it. Thanks for following this heartfelt story. Share your thoughts about this journey of professional growth and unexpected love in the comments below. If you believe that people can change and that true partnership means bringing out the best in each other, hit the like button and share this story with someone who needs inspiration. Subscribe now to never miss our uplifting tales of love, courage, and transformation. Let's continue celebrating the beautiful possibilities that life offers when we're brave enough to trust in growth and second chances.